EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365. My good partner, Johnny Mack, is here, and we're going to talk about rookie minicamps. We got two great guests lined up today. We got Johnny Stolness and a fan favorite, Bill Colarulo. All the people in the chat box have been looking for Bill Colarulo. So we'll touch back in with Bill Colarulo today from 97.5 The Fanatic. Johnny Mack, a good Thursday to you, sir. How you doing today?
Doing well. Happy rookie minicamp eve for those who like to celebrate that. Exciting times.
Yeah, when you put out the dates, I'm going to pull them up just so that people are informed. So it looks like there's three. You can explain for the people what the difference is. There's a rookie minicamp, which is obviously for the rookies. And then there's OTA off-season workouts. And then there's mandatory minicamp, which I guess would be for everybody. So the rookie minicamp is May 3rd, May 4th, which is tomorrow and Saturday. And then you have the OTA off-season workouts, which are May 20th, May 22nd, and 23rd, May 28th, and then May 30th and 31st. And then mandatory minicamp is June 4th to 6th. So what do you expect to learn from these? Can you watch them? Do you see anything? Is it really just to get the players acclimated? What should we look forward to learning from this, especially with the rookies, where I think you're starting to see some new faces?
Yeah, it's more just acclimation, trying to get everything, especially when you have two new coordinators again. And this is the first mandatory minicamp of the Nick Sirianni era. Because if you go back, they had scheduled a mini camp in his first year, but that was the end of COVID. The league and the Players Association were going back and forth. There wasn't off-season work prior to that. They were, hedging and dragging their feet. So Nick sort of got together with some of the veteran players and said, all right, will you come in for the OTAs, the voluntary work, and we'll scrap the mini camp. And that's what was agreed upon. And all of a sudden they overachieved. They made the playoffs. So it's like, well, no reason to change.
Right.
Then
if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Then they go to the Super Bowl, and there's obviously no reason to change. Now there's reason to change. So minicamp is back for the first time since Doug Peterson. That's the most valuable because we get to watch. Those are open to the media in their entirety. So we get to watch the entire practice, and it's been a long time since we've been able to do that. Rookie minicamp will be in there tomorrow, but we don't get to see much, just basically 10, 15 minutes like a regular season practice. And then in the cluster of OTAs, I like to call them, you have these 3-day clusters. You get a one open to the media. And again, it's more 10, 15 minutes, more an opportunity to get video pictures of players. And you get to talk to Nick Sirianni and certain players. So that's the more valuable part. But as far as on-field work, yeah, we don't get a good handle till minicamp. And at least we're going to have minicamp this year. So that's something. And probably the most notable is where guys are lining up. You can see the skeleton of the depth chart where they're going to start when training camp begins in late July. So, but you're not going to learn meaningful battles or how Vic Fangio is going to change things up, or how Kellen Moore, even more importantly, because on offense, they're supposed to change somewhat. Defense, they're essentially playing the same scheme, but hopefully it's better taught. It's people understand it better. There's better communication, that type of thing. So you're not going to get any of that really, to be honest, until training camp. But you're going to see a lot of excitement. T-shirts and shorts are the time for the athletes.
The occasional viral social media video of somebody making a good catch or something.
Yeah. For the, maybe you see some coverage techniques and, but even that, it's very limited. So it's for the guys, think about, I always go back to Donnell Pumphrey. how excited people were to see him on the field because he was a undersized jitterbug. So that was his wheelhouse, the t-shirts and shorts. And then when the pads came on, it was like, oof, we might have a problem here. So, you know, take it all with a grain of salt, but it's good to get on the field. Good to get some grass time.
Yeah, agreed.
Peterson references.
Yeah, so good that fans are looking forward to that. That's right around the corner. So everybody can tune in on social media. I'm sure John will be covering it extensively. Make sure you follow John J.F. McMullen. I want to thank everybody, all of our chatters, Twiz, Dave, Luke, and Callie, and the Dank for checking in with us today. We appreciate all your guys' viewership. Make sure you like the show, as it's the number one thing you can do to help us grow, to help the show reach more Eagles fans. So we appreciate that. And then I said it yesterday, and I want to give a shout out to anybody listening to the podcast this morning or any morning. Our podcast numbers are tremendous, and we appreciate you on there. If you're listening on there, make sure you leave us a review so that we can reach more Eagles fans as well. John, we talk about this a lot, and this is going to be a tough conversation for some fans or for maybe even you to answer this. What equals success this year for the Eagles? We talked a little bit about yesterday, Nick Sirianni being on the not the hot seat, but he's a lame duck coach. If he doesn't perform this year, he could be on the outs. What equals success this year? I mean, and you talked about it last year where the expectations were so inflated that if they didn't make it to the Super Bowl, it was a failed season, which is just a little bit out of whack. What should we be expecting at least going into this season? And what do you think would be enough for, say, Nick to stick around for another year?
Well, making the playoffs isn't it? That happened last year, and they got bounced and embarrassed, and that wasn't good enough. So it starts there from my perspective. And really only one person matters here, and that's Jeffrey Lurie. What are his expectations? Right. If you're talking about the fan base, their expectations are sky high. Is that realistic to go to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl? It's probably never realistic unless you're Kansas City going into a season. A lot of things have to align to go to a Super Bowl, never mind win the Super Bowl. So I always think that's, but unfortunately that's kind of the landscape of pro sports. I always joke it's turned into Ricky Bobby rules. If you're not first, you're last.
Right.
And I don't believe that. I don't think most NFL teams and NFL coaches and NFL executives believe that. I think there's, it's a process. The Eagles have taken a step back, try to take 2 steps forward. That doesn't mean it's going to happen immediately. I would say he's got to win a playoff game at least, or at the bare minimum, be competitive if and when they're ousted. And I think that should be enough for Jeffrey Lurie. But Jeffrey's far more tempered than. I don't think that's going to be acceptable to the fan base. I think they think this is a great team, and and I put out those implied betting odds yesterday. The Eagles were like 7th or 8th, and that's probably where they should be. Point being, there's better teams on paper still. So if you're assuming they're the best team, your expectations are probably a little bit out of whack to this point. They got a lot of changes on defense. They need a lot of things to go right on defense. They need young players to hit the ground running. They need reclamation projects to play well. That's a lot of pieces that have to come together. And the thing about Nick, his clock has started. Doesn't mean it's over. So whether you talk about lame duck or whether you talk about there's a period you have when you're hired as a head coach, and it's getting smaller and smaller, where you have a little bit of rope, and then the clock starts. And that usually starts, the evidence of that is when you're getting rid of coordinators. All right. They're the scapegoats.
Right.
They're the problem by definition. So fix the problem, and then it's on you. So if the problem still exists,
Right.
that's
They're
how
not gonna.
coaches get fired. And the
I think it's a
clock is
lot
never.
trickier too when you consider. I mean, we're talking about expectations from the defensive side of the football. I think expectations are marginal. They're regular. The defense stunk last year. If they're top 15, I think fans are happy. But you go to the offensive side, you got two wide receivers making all that money. You got Jalen Hurts making that money. They added now, the big name running back and Saquon Barkley, who they're paying big money to. You extended all the offensive linemen. I think the offensive side is where it gets really tricky, where if this isn't a high-powered offense, I think there's going to be a lot of people, fans, and maybe people in the front office included, who are not happy with the way it's moving. So there's a lot of pressure, on Sirianni coming into this season, especially from the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, and they're gonna be high powered, but even that isn't the answer, because they were high powered last year and it wasn't good enough.
Yeah, but they collapsed. So they were high powered until week 12 rolled around, and then all of a sudden they turn into this terrible team, and everybody always only remembers what it's like. It's a
Yeah,
what have you done for me lately league,
there's
right? I mean,
there's a lot of recency bias,
right.
and but again, they improved in a lot of areas, a lot of important areas on offense, which is crazy to think about from the year prior. Most notably, fourth downs, third downs, and that's what Nick emphasizes: situational football. They were better on third and fourth downs than they were the year prior. Um, but yeah, they finished poorly. The quarterback regressed. I argue the only difference between the Eagles' offense in 2022 and 2023 is the turnovers. I think if you eliminate them, it's pretty much the same group. You probably go from 8 back to 3. Um,
Isn't
and
that a
any
cause for concern, though, John? I mean, everybody improving. Cilio points this out all the time, and I push back on him. But at some point, he's right. Where AJ Brown improved, Devontae Smith improved, everybody improved except the quarterback. And the quarterback's the one guy you need to improve, probably more than everybody else.
Well, yeah, it's the most important position on the field, so he's more important by definition. Um, and yeah, but I look at it, when people were making fun of Dak Prescott a couple years ago, he had a big turnover season, and Eagles fans were enjoying that and taking shots. And I said, be careful. His history says he's not a high turnover player, and there's a randomness to turnovers that sometimes you can't control.
Right.
Some you can. You have to look at each individual one. I always bring Jalen, the Jets game. That's Jalen Hurts. That's something he can correct. Seattle game. That's Jalen Hurts. That's something he can correct. Tip football going the wrong way. There's some randomness to that. But usually, guys who take care of the football well, they might have an outlier season where the ball just isn't bouncing their way, and they generally regress back to what they typically are. And that's what I think is going to happen with Jalen Hurts, because his history says he takes care of the football. He didn't do it as well as he should have last year. And I think that's a relatively easy correction. And maybe that gets you from 8 to 5 right there. And maybe you need a little bit more improvement. There's some other concerns I'm kind of amazed how quickly people just assume the offensive line is going to be just as good without Jason Kelsey and without a defined answer at right guard. Um, that could be an issue, and that could affect the offensive consistency, despite how good Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson are. And Lane's getting older. At some point, you're going to have a decline there. There's some questions. You still need to figure out who the second tight end is. You still have to figure out who the third receiver is. And God forbid if AJ or DeMonte get hurt. I mean, that's dropping off a cliff to number 3, whoever your favorite is, whether it's Paris Campbell or
Yeah.
Devontae Parker or Johnny Wilson or Anaya Smith, that is dropping off a cliff. But you can't have backups as good as AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. That's not realistic. So that's where I said a lot of things have to align to go to a Super Bowl or make a deep playoff run in the NFL, unless you have an eraser like Patrick Mahomes. And with all due respect to Jalen Hurts and nobody else, anybody else at quarterback, they're not Patrick Mahomes. They're
Real
not.
quick on Jalen Hurts, you talked about regressing to the mean with the turnovers. How much do you put into, though, the fact that they played? I know it wasn't a completely different offense, but he didn't run the RPO. He didn't have he was more of a passing quarterback last year, didn't run the ball as much, and the turnovers go up. Now they bring in Kellen Moore, who's a guy who's going to spread the football around, or at least call plays to spread the football around. Is that a problem?
I don't know. I mean, we had the knee injury, so how much did that affect the Eagles' mentality when Jalen clearly wasn't 100% when it came to the running game? At the end of the day, I think it was he ran it 165 times in 2022, 157 in 2023. So there was no grandiose movement from that perspective. Now he obviously missed a couple games, so there's a little bit, but they were still using it to that degree. He wasn't as effective doing it. Now, what is the reason? Hopefully, it's what he was dealing with his knee, and he's very obviously closed and hyper focused on not admitting injuries and not wanting to talk about them. And if he's out there, expect the same level of production, which is a good thing, by the way.
I think it can be counterproductive too, though. I mean, if you're dealing with an injury and you're making the money you're making and you have the weapons around you that you're making or that, that are around you, I almost think it'd be better to say that, because now I know, and I get there's a lot of that goes into why he wouldn't say that, but
Yeah, you don't
I
want to
mean,
alert the defense. Not that, they
right.
know, but you don't want to say, hey, my knee hurts.
Yeah, I get it.
And all of a sudden you got 330-pound guys trying to give
Crush
an
you. Yeah.
extra little shot to try to win a football game. That's unfortunately the violent nature of this game that they try to legislate out, but they're never going to be able to do. So, I mean, he wasn't as effective. He wasn't as explosive running the football. And that's a we'll see situation. If he's back, if he's 100%, he looks like he's explosive as he was in 2022 or 2021. Everything's copacetic. If he's not, then you have to start talking about, maybe shifting the philosophy a little bit. Not you're never going to take the RPO and the zone read stuff out of the Eagles offense as long as Jalen Hurts is here, but maybe more temperate with it, at least a little bit. And that should happen naturally as his career goes on anyway, as he ages. But overall, despite everything we just said, and this is the first time we've talked about Jalen in a long time on this show because there's so many other things to talk about all the time. He still had a pretty good year. It's not like he was terrible.
I thought he was terrible in the playoff game, and that concerns me.
Well, the playoff game, everybody was terrible.
Yeah, but you're John, everybody, and we just talked about it. Everybody's not the starting quarterback. Everybody's not making $50 million.
Well, and I would say, first of all, this offense is not the same with AJ Brown off the field. Number one.
That's true.
If
That's
people
a
don't
fact.
get that, just look at them before AJ got here. Look at them when AJ couldn't play in the playoffs. And it ain't the same offense. That's number one. Number two, you could argue. I mean, just from a number standpoint, his passer rating was over 100. He was one of the better players in Tampa. The defense was just abysmal.
The defense was bad, but John, they put up 9 points.
Yeah, I'm not.
I mean,
I'm
that's
saying-
not good, dude.
He didn't play well, but at the bottom of he's 25 of 35, 71%, 250 yards, 100 passer rating. It wasn't Jalen Hurts. Jason Kelsey, who's going to the Hall of Fame, was abused.
Yeah, he was.
Abused. And that
I thought that was the first sign that Kelsey was going to retire.
Well, that wasn't the first sign.
Not the first sign, but I mean the first look. Like, okay,
Yeah,
this is very real. The season's coming to an end, and Jason just got worked. This is very.
He did get worked, but that's not the reason he retired. He had told certain people that he was going to retire before the season started. Now he can change his mind, but he I think he just crossed that line in his mind. But he did. All I'm trying to say is he did not play well in the playoffs, and that list is long. And Jalen Hurts was one of the better Eagles in the playoffs, I dare say. Not that's a low bar, granted, but he was one of the better Eagles.
We'll get to a break. We have John Stonelis from Bleeding Green Nation on the other side of the break. I want to thank everybody for checking in. Make sure you like the shows. It's the #1 way you can help us grow, help Johnny Mac's opinions and his thoughts reach more Eagles fans, which I think every Eagle fan should hear, because every time we talk to John, every time I talk to John, I learn more about the Eagles and learn more about the game of football. Thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like the show. On the other side of the break, John Stonelis from Bleeding Green Nation. And then in hour number 2, Bill Colarulo. I know a lot of the fans in the chat box are missing Bill Colarulo, so we'll have him up in hour number 2. But coming up after the break, Johnny Stonelis. Stay tuned, everybody.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up. And go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Birds 365, a Thursday edition, and we are joined now by the great friend of the program, John Stolness. John, thanks for joining us, man.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
What's up, bud?
Hey.
I was just reading Adam Schefter, who was on 97.5, and he was talking about Howie and how he manipulates the draft board. And he brought up a good point. If I said to John Stolness before the draft that the Eagles would come out of it with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and 3 future picks, what would your reaction have been to that? Probably no shot, right?
Yeah, no shot. And you would have to just assume that there was a healthy bit of luck that the board fell Howie's way again, and that he had a good read on what other teams are doing. And so it's a nice combination of hard work by knowing and making phone calls. And you heard in the days leading up to the draft that Howie was calling everybody, trying to figure out if there were ways to move up, where he might need to move up to. It seemed like they had a cornerback in the back of their minds for their first round pick, and things just fell the way they did. And Howie's gotten lucky in the last couple of drafts with players falling down to areas where he didn't think he'd be able to get them. And so, it's just the draft couldn't have gone any better for Roseman. And I think we said that last year for him as well. Now that just needs to translate into production on the field. But in terms of getting value and getting players in spots where you didn't think you'd get them, and at positions where you actually needed a lot of help, yeah, and they couldn't have gone any better.
Yeah, Howie's just really been amazing at getting the value out of the draft board. Me and John continue to go back to the Cooper DeJean move of in the second round, you wait to 40, then you pounce. Denver trades out, and 4 cornerbacks go. Just tremendous reading of the board there. But I just want to get your opinion on a couple of the players. We can start in that round 1 with Quinyon Mitchell. What do you think of the player? Any concern with where he played in school? Any concern with the player, or are you happy with that pick? What do you think of Quinyon Mitchell?
Yeah, I certainly think I get to watch. I don't get to watch a lot of college football, but in the weeks leading up, you certainly kind of get caught up on some of the guys who you think could be targets. And everything you read about him is, I don't worry as much about him that he's from Toledo, because he does have some tape against some top-notch players. Marvin Harrison Jr. obviously played him pretty well. It sure seems like in terms of cornerback prospects, he's about as polished as you can get coming out of college. There are some areas of his game where it seems like he's not quite as fluid maybe as some other cornerbacks, but he's got all the physical tools. He's got the speed, could use a little work, I think, with his hands. A lot of pass breakups, would like to see maybe in the NFL turn those into some more interceptions. But, generally speaking, it looks as though he's one of those guys that will be a cornerback 1, and it won't take a whole lot of time for him to be able to develop into that kind of a player. And it's good that he's come into a secondary where Darius Slay's got that spot locked up. James Bradbury, I think, is going to have the opportunity to start as CB2 this year. I don't anticipate him not being on the team by the time training camp or the regular season rolls around. And, when you bring Avonte Maddox back and you've got CJ GJ in the mix, he'll probably play some slot, but mostly safety. We don't know. It's a good place for him to learn. It's a good place for him to be productive in his rookie season. But at the same time, he's not thrust into a starting spot. It doesn't seem like at this point. Now, maybe they decide to move on from James Bradbury before then, but I don't anticipate that. So Quinyon Mitchell no one thought he would go where he went. It's phenomenal they were able to get him when they did, and we'll see how it plays out. They've got to develop some of these guys. That's a big part of this. Is like, can the coaching staff develop these guys, get these guys to be productive NFL players, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, John, because I think a lot of fans go, you either draft a good or a bad player, and that's it. And really, no, you got to get somebody in the building, and you got to develop them, and you got to get them up to speed and up to reaching their potential. And the Bradbury part of what you said is interesting, because you're one of the few people, and I hope you're right, by the way, that the Eagles keep James Bradbury. I've been saying it. I think he's a perfect fit for Vic Fangio, because he's so smart. He's so savvy. He understands zone coverage. And then I look at rookie defensive backs in a complicated Vic Fangio scheme, and I go, there's going to be some hiccups. Not that it's a bad thing,
right?
Because you're going to learn, but there's going to be mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectations for first-round picks in this league, The first time Quinyon Mitchell gets beat, and guys, I hate to break it to you, he's going to get beat.
Yeah.
Every NFL cornerback does. And by the way, in big scheme, it might not even be his fault, but you know how this works, John. You see a clip and Mitchell's running at a receiver who's 10 yards ahead of him, and you go, oh, what's Quinyon Mitchell doing?
Yeah.
It is a brutal position to play in the NFL. Add to that as a rookie, and in this particular complicated scheme, I would love to say, hey, sit behind James Bradbury and Darius Slay for a while.
Yeah, I mean, there's a balance there, right? I mean, if you're drafting in the top 10, like when the Eagles getting Jalen Carter last year, you expect a top 10 pick to be productive right away, unless maybe it's a quarterback. But even then, I think most of those guys are playing now, right from jump. So when you're picking at 22, when you're picking in the latter half of the first round, I don't think you can necessarily just expect that this guy is going to come right in and play at a quality starter level for a team with Super Bowl aspirations right away. It's just not a fair expectation, no matter what ranking he had coming on the board in terms of his position coming into the draft. And so you get the benefit of having some veteran cornerbacks to be able to mentor him and for him to learn from. So that in year 2, yes, I think then you can expect him to jump into a starting role, because you do only have these first round picks for 4 years, and then you have the 5th year that you can give to your first round picks, but you do need them to be productive at some point early on, right? Like I hear people talk all the time, well, you project these guys, it's 3-4 years down the road. Well, you better know what you have by the time year 3 rolls around, or else you're kind of stuck in no man's land in terms of, is this a guy you want to keep? Is this a guy who's going to be somebody that you can count on long term? And that's why you're kind of getting to a point with guys like Nakobe Dean where you really need to see something here in year number 3. You want to draft for the future, but you do need to get some results early on in the process, so you kind of know what you're looking at.
Yeah, all of a sudden the defensive back room, safeties, corners, there's a lot of bodies in there, a lot of young bodies, but a lot of bodies. So we'll see how it all shakes out. John, I want to get your opinion on the 3rd round pick. This one seems to be, I'm not going to grade the player yet. We obviously, like you just said, he has to be developed. We don't know what he's going to be, but what do you think of the decision there? They take a developmental type edge rusher, a guy that just transitioned to edge the last couple of years. He played at a really small school in Houston Christian, former safety. What do you think of the pick there to trade back a couple times and then take a project at edge?
Without knowing what the Eagles' grades are on some of the other guys around the areas where they traded back, I don't necessarily hate the move, because what you're taking an upside shot there in the on day 2. But it did remind me of the Davion Taylor pick from a couple of years ago. Now I know there's differences. He's played more football than Taylor has. He's got a different skill set. There are some analysts out there who looked at him and thought, yeah, that's about where he would be drafted. And some thought it was a little bit of a reach for the Eagles. I would like maybe I'm a little bit less risk averse, but I would like a little more certainty, I think, at that spot in the draft, as much as you can get it, certainly understanding where you are there. And I feel like the chances that he becomes a good NFL player are less than maybe somebody else you could have taken in that spot. So don't hate it, but it was not my favorite move of the draft. I think you better have people in the building who really know how to get the best out of people. Like if you're taking an offensive line project, I feel pretty good about that, because we saw what Stoutland did with Jordan Mailata. Like there's certain guys at certain positions where the coaching staff, you have a pretty good feeling that they're going to be able to turn them into something. And so I guess, we'll see whether or not the Eagles have the coaches in place to kind of to bring the most out of this guy. And I think we'll kind of have a better idea what we see in Nolan Smith here in year 2, whether or not the coaching staff is able to bring, guys like this along. Now, Nolan Smith, certainly a much more pedigreed player, it certainly would seem to have a much higher floor, but can you develop edge rushers? Can you develop these young guys? Can you take the skill sets that they've shown in college and add to it? Can you add some power to their game? Can you add some different moves to their game in order to make them more well-rounded? Can you make them better run defenders if they have to be on the field in that particular spot? So a lot of it's going to be on the coaching and whether or not they can coach this guy up. It's very risky, and I didn't love it, didn't hate it.
Yeah, and your point about the calendar before is very meaningful when it comes to Alex Hunt, John, because you want to know if you got something by year 3. And in the case of Hunt, the Eagles have kind of admitted this is a longer term project. And we all know, even more so for the Eagles than other teams, they like to make decisions early to help out the salary cap and help out the roster building process. I don't think they're going to know about this player probably till year 4. And that's a situation where I don't know if it's their wheelhouse to a certain degree. So I'm with you. It's a little bit more. I'm nitpicking. I've said it pretty consistently, but I'm tired of people giving Howie all the credit. He gets enough credit. So I would have went in a different direction. But it's not terrible. I can't get drastically upset by it. But the calendar, to me, I think that was a good point by you. That probably is getting pushed back on Alex Hunt. And I don't know if that's a situation you want with your 3rd round pick in a best case scenario. What's your favorite day 3 pick?
It's interesting. I feel there's a little bit of mixed reviews on Will Shipley. I think if he can be a slightly more productive Kenny Gainwell, I like that pick. But I think,
that's a high bar, by the way, John. That's a high bar,
right? I know. And Anais Smith seems like a fun player. I don't know if he's going to be. I don't know if he's going to be somebody who sticks around for a long time. But it seems like they need to find something other than AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, something to hit kind of in the later rounds. Quez Watkins looked like he was going to be that guy. He really did look like for a few minutes there that he was going to kind of be someone who could really give you something as a downfield threat. And it just never materialized. And it seems like they're still looking for that, somebody who can stretch the field a little bit more and take some of the pressure off of Brown and Smith. And I don't expect Smith to do that or any other draft pick to do that in year 1 or anything like that. But I think he's intriguing. And I'm curious to see exactly how Kellen Moore is going to use all these different pieces here that they have on offense now. But that was a pick I liked late. I like taking flyers on interesting wide receivers late in the draft, because you never know. You might hit on one of those different guys. You get them in the right scheme. You get them with a good quarterback, and you have, again, 2 wide receivers that are among the best in the game that he can learn from. That was a move I liked. I thought that was fun.
It's also a good strategy because that seems to be all that college football is producing now is receivers, receiver. Yeah. So I agree with that process as well. Offensive line, though, the one thing, I asked you at the start of this, if I told you they were getting Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, adding 3 picks, you'd probably say, no way. That's crazy. Well done, Howie.
Yeah.
It also, if I told you there were going to be 24 offensive linemen taken on the first 2 days of the draft, and the Eagles were 0 for 24, like the worst Philly slump, what would your reaction have been to they're not getting an offensive lineman in an offensive lineman heavy draft?
I would say that, well, I think sometimes they really do go by best player available, right? And I do think that's kind of, I think, Howie said to, his scouts too, pound the table for your guys, pound the table for who you like. And it seems like they really did that, and they followed a lot of their scouts and what their scouts liked. They really like Tyler Steen. I think that's the big takeaway from the fact that they didn't get an offensive lineman here, an offensive guard, offensive tackle, because you do need to beef up that area of the interior of the offensive line. And we're really relying on Cam Jurgens to be the Jason Kelce replacement at center. I mean, that was the initial plan. And so that's fine. That's the plan that they're sticking with. That was the plan 2 years ago when they drafted him. And that's the plan now. So I like Tyler Steen. I think he's an interesting player. He looked good, I think, in training camp last year. I thought he looked good in some of the preseason games in which he played. And I think it's good to give him the first crack at the starting right guard job. I am surprised, though, that they didn't take somebody, that they didn't grab anybody. And maybe with that pick where they got Hill, that would have been a good spot to instead of trading back, maybe if trade up, maybe go up and grab somebody who could potentially be a part of your rotation here in 2024 and definitely in 2025. I have to rely on the fact that Howie Roseman had a good feel for when these runs were coming and who these players were, and he must just not have liked anybody. My guess is he would have taken an offensive lineman in the second round if DeJean hadn't fallen.
That's where I think it would have fell. If they don't get rid of 50 and 53, and Cooper doesn't fall, that's where I think they end up with an offensive lineman. John, I want to ask you about the fan favorite pick, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Everybody's been clamoring for a linebacker all year long, and he's a 5th-round pick, but Johnny Mack and I have discussed extensively this week. He does have a chance to start on a team that does not have a lot of good linebackers. Even though he's a 5th-round pick, there is a path to starting. What do you think of that pick, and does he help fix the linebacker problems in Philadelphia?
Well, it definitely was great value. I think people thought he would go earlier than that, and maybe not a whole lot earlier than that, round earlier than that, but I think it was good value there. It was certainly a feel-good moment. The worry, of course, is pass coverage. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, but he seems to be a really instinctual player. And at linebacker, you can be perhaps not the most physically gifted player in the world, but still be a productive player. I mean, look at TJ Edwards.
That's what he reminds me of. TJ Edwards. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's got to get bigger. TJ's rocked up.
TJ's bigger, right?
Yeah.
Well, but TJ got bigger too. I mean, he
remade his body here. Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect example of the developmental process. Yeah.
Yep. Remade his body, got more athletic, but he still was not going to be one of those guys that's flying all over the field. But you have a guy like Devin White who does have all the physical tools, but a lot of times doesn't seem to know where to be on the field and what to do.
I would say all the time.
All the time. That's certainly fair. And a guy like Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who does seem to know, have that intuition of where to be. And I think when you're playing in space, when you're in the middle of the field and you're trying to navigate all that, I think that's a valuable thing. So there absolutely is a path for him starting, and if not starting, then being a really, really important part of the linebacker rotation. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see the Eagles bring Zach Cunningham back at some point this offseason, just as another body to have in there. Because again, Nakobe Dean, the big question mark, we just don't know with this guy. And we don't know with Devin White either. It's the position on the team that has the most question marks still. And there really isn't anybody else out there in free agency here you're going to go out and get, unless some cuts happen at some point between now and training camp or when training camp starts. So yes, there's absolutely a path where he can be a productive player, where maybe he can even start. I think if Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is starting, I do think something went wrong. Like, I think the idea here is Devin White is starting and Nakobe Dean is starting. Right. Yeah. And that's the plan. It's not a great plan, but it's a plan.
And to Zander's point, I said there's a small path. Everything's got to go right for Jeremiah. He's got to hit the ground running. He's got to be spectacular in the summer. Just that the Eagles don't have good linebackers. So if you really show up and perform, they might say, hey, we might as well use this kid, because we don't have anything else.
Right.
But, we'll see Devin White. It's crazy to me. I always go back to Jack Del Rio because I'm old. But for those who don't know, Jack Del Rio was a heck of a linebacker in his prime, was a Pro Bowl linebacker, couldn't run a lick. And he was a great nickel linebacker. And the reason he was, the pass coverage, played a lot of zone, very instinctive, always knew where to be. And that's a problem for quarterbacks. It really is. Instincts are so important at that position. I think everybody goes, well, Devin White, he can run. And you bring up TJ. TJ Edwards was a top 10 coverage linebacker in football, according to Pro Football Focus. Now, you can hate them, but generally, when they say you're doing something well, you're doing it well. Whereas Devin White, bottom 5, bottom 10 every year. But because he can run, he's a great coverage linebacker. At what point does playing on the field and instincts matter, John?
Well, and with a guy like Devin White, the speed, are you going to be covering slot receivers, running with them step for step, 20, 30 yards down the field. No, your job as a cover linebacker, you're mostly dealing with running backs and tight ends and number 4 receivers maybe every once in a while, but it's instinctual, right? You want to kind of know, where is he coming out of his break? Which direction is he going to go? Where, reading the quarterback, reading where the other players are. Where do I need to be based on where my guys are? So much of that in zone coverage is based on instinct and anticipation and having a feel for where the quarterback's going to go with the ball, where the tight end's going to go, all of that. And the speed is good and the athleticism is good if you have it, but the instincts of knowing how to attack the ball, how to attack the receiver, where to be, to step in front of a tight end, to knock it away or to disrupt his path within 5 yards. That's the stuff that a good coverage linebacker needs to be able to do. And I don't know if Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is going to be able to do that at the NFL level, but having the athleticism, having speed just in and of itself, it's like in baseball. If you can throw 100 miles an hour, that's great. But if you can't throw it over the plate, it doesn't matter how fast you throw.
Yeah. Yeah. And the best example recently, I would say, is Michael Kendricks, who was a tremendous athlete, probably the best athlete they had at linebacker before Devin White. You have to go back to Michael Kendrick. He wasn't a great coverage player because he just didn't have a feel for it. Whereas Jordan Hicks, and not that Jordan was a terrible athlete, but he wasn't Michael Kendricks from a physical perspective, but he was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really good because he knew what was going on.
Right.
And he knew where to be.
Right.
I think it's more important at linebacker maybe than anywhere else on defense. But the Eagles devaluing of that position as a whole, they've thrown us a lot of curveballs, John, this offseason with Saquon Barkley. And they said, yeah, we believe in, but linebacker, nope, we're going to wait till day 3. We talked about Jalen Hunt. Peyton Wilson was there. They could have drafted him. He might be the best linebacker in the draft, had some injury concerns. Maybe that was an issue. Yeah, I look at this team and they got a pretty good plan everywhere but linebacker. When is Howie giving us the curveball? Ever?
Yeah, I think we thought this was the year, right? This was the year they identify somebody in free agency and make a big money play for them, and it didn't happen. They decided to. I think they felt like they needed to invest in free agency at edge rusher with Bryce Huff because they knew they were moving on from Hassan Reddick, and that's still a transactional decision that I don't agree with. But yeah, I think Devin White it's a fine ad. I don't know. I mean, it could really work out, but we're using hope as a tactic again at linebacker. And I think
Howard's the one who says hope is not a strategy, John.
Well, the actions belie that corollary from Howie so far.
Certainly at linebacker they do.
At linebacker, no, they just, I don't know what kind of player they're looking for. I don't think, and I think that's what really gets me is they haven't found a mix, and maybe with Vic Fangio in here, Vic knows what he wants at linebacker, and maybe he's happy. Maybe he likes what he has to work with, especially if the secondary is loaded and you're going to play a lot of safeties and a lot of cornerbacks. I think
we're going to see a lot of 3 safeties, and I think we're going to see one linebacker on the field a lot. Yeah. That's my early assessment, but that's a good point as well, because we've always known what type of running back they wanted. They couldn't get him. Christian McCaffrey is their white whale. You got to have pass catching ability. You got to be able to do things in space, blah, blah, blah. We don't know what they want at linebacker other than a Band-Aid. Hope it's Nigel Bradham and plays a little bit better and maybe not beat up Cabana boys. I love Nigel. Sorry, that's a shot.
Yeah, Nigel was a good player. I think I know TJ Edwards. Maybe he had his camp set on returning to his hometown of Chicago, and he was never going to re-sign in Philadelphia. But it still blows my mind that here's a guy who's an undrafted rookie that you developed. They obviously worked hard.
I would have taken so much pride in TJ Edwards.
Yeah. It's not even like he got buku bucks. No. I mean, that was a reasonable contract for that productive of a player.
Howie's got less of an ego than me, because I would have taken so much pride. I would have said, look what we did. Yeah. And they were like, nope, out the door.
Yeah. So that was the decision at linebacker that really makes me think they don't know what they want. Right. And ever since then, they've just been trying to find some combination of players and skill sets that will work without spending money at the position and without investing heavily in draft capital at the position. And we'll see it. We'll see how it works here in 2024, but it certainly is the position with the biggest amount of question marks.
Yeah, I guess a 3rd round pick for Nakobe Dean is the highest amount of investment we're gonna get.
Yeah, Davion.
If $7 million a year or whatever it was for TJ isn't cutting it, 3rd round pick, we might have been lucky to have even gotten that. John, I want to get your opinion on a couple of the other day 3 picks. I'm a big fan of that offensive guard they took from Michigan. Did anything else stand out to you in day 3? I know it's a depth day, but I did think the Eagles did a pretty good job at getting value, getting potential players that could make a difference on the team. Maybe not this year, but down in the future. What'd you think of the offensive guard from Michigan and the rest of the day 3 picks?
It's again, you're right. It's like that's a kind of a roll of the dice with the day 3 picks. Johnny Wilson. Johnny Wilson was day 3, right? He was.
He was day 3. Yeah,
right.
Talent there, 6'8" or 6'7" receiver. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like guys who are tall, who can get up there and make and hopefully be a contested catch guy. I think Trevor Keegan is interesting. Dylan McMahon, I don't know a lot about these guys, so I would be lying to you if I said this guy's got great lateral movement.
That's our buddy Ian Cummings. Yeah,
exactly. But I mean, give Jeff Stoutland those guys and let him cook. Let him see what he can get out of those guys. Any offensive lineman they take on day 3, I'm happy with, because I feel like if you've got Stoutland in the building still, he may not be able to turn every player into a Pro Bowler, but man, he turned Andre Dillard into at least a serviceable backup at left tackle, to the point where he got a big free agent contract someplace else.
Man.
Which somebody else out, right? I think he was just cut. Yeah.
He was, but he got that contract.
Yeah, he did.
He got over $10 million a year.
Yeah.
I like to believe too, if they took a guy late and he's an offensive lineman, Jeff Stoutland was the guy that liked something. I don't know what it was, and we're never going to find that out, but he must have said something that he liked about that player.
Yeah, probably.
And round 5, there are plenty of great players who have come out of round 5. I mean, it was late in round 5. It was in the 170s, I think, is when Keegan was picked.
Yeah, I think he went 176, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I mean, it's certainly, I mean, if we're saying Jeremiah Trotter has an outside chance of starting and playing well, I think you could look at a guy like Keegan, who went 15 picks later, and say, if somebody gets hurt, can this guy play guard for us for a half or for a game or something like that? Can Stoutland do enough with this guy, especially when you've already got Mailata, when you've got Lane Johnson, when you've got Landon Dickerson, when you've got Cam Jurgens, you've got all these other guys on the offensive line already. You don't need these guys to be super productive early on. So give Stoutland the projects. Let him work with these guys and see if he can make something out of it. At least give yourself depth. Make some backups. Give yourself some Jack Driscolls, who, at least if the game, if you need somebody for a couple of games, you can put him in there and it's not going to be a disaster.
And that's where I like the Becton move after the draft. They go out I mean, he's a young guy, played a ton of games in the league already. And he's got crazy physical attributes. He's like 6'7" or 6'8". So I love that. I love that pick from that perspective. Jeff Stoutland can definitely turn that guy to a serviceable backup.
No pressure on Dylan McMahon, by the way. At John Stolness, make sure you follow John on X. Read him at Bleeding Green with our buddy BLG. Was on yesterday. Phillies does a lot of Phillies work, but what the Phillies won 19 in April? Is that a record, John? Did I hear that?
They
right?
won. I think they won 20 games in April.
20?
That was 20 games in April.
So
no, you're right. It was 19 in April because they had one in March and then they had one yesterday. So 19 was the most they've ever won in the month of April. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're hitting their stride pretty early, so it should be a fun season with the Phillies. I mentioned Dylan McMahon. The Eagles drafted Jason Kelsey with the 191st overall pick back in the day. They drafted poor Dylan McMahon, an athletic center, at 190. So that's what he's got to live up to.
Right.
That's probably not
the future of the
happening.
Position, John.
Yeah.
The future. There he is.
Future. It's going to happen again. Lightning is going to strike.
Yeah.
Well, now Zander brings up a good point with Becton. Now, my buddy Jeff Mosher brought up maybe they move him to guard. I see him. He's like, I think we saw him when the eclipse of the sun came. I think that was Mekhi Becton because that's how big he is. Is that their plan? Are they out of the box and saying, this guy's the former I think it was the 11th overall pick. He's got tremendous athletic ability. He was with the Jets, so maybe that explains some of the struggles. He had some injuries, and he wants to be with Jeff Stoutland from all indications to rescue his career. Could you play and he's closer to 6'8". The NFL, when they do things, they don't round up. So he's closer to 6'8" than 6'6", 6'7" actually. Mm-hmm. Is that too big inside? Is it even a thought? Is that their potential curveball to fix right guard? Because I don't think they're as high on Tyler Steen as other people do. And they want competition. Not that Tyler can't win the job, but they don't want to hand it to him.
Yeah.
And it might be Matt Hennessy, but you think Mekhi Becton could be a curveball at guard?
Could be. I think anytime you're going from an organization like the Jets, who I know people still think they're going to be good this year, and their defense has been good in the last couple of years, but the Jets just have kind of been a more-bound organization for a long time, to a spot like Philadelphia, where you saw what Jordan Mailata became and how these other guys get developed. Becton has to just be thrilled to be able to go someplace. And so I think he automatically gets more confidence coming to Philadelphia, just because I think he feels like he's going to actually get the best coaching available. So confidence increasing, has a fresh start, has to feel good. You get a clean slate coming to a place where there are no expectations on you. The first round expectations are not there. You don't have to live up to all of that. Nobody's expecting you to start this year. So even if you're just a backup, that's fine. But you're here to learn, and you're here to improve, and you're here to grow. So that's an advantage that Becton has now. And the Eagles don't need him necessarily, it doesn't seem like, to be the guard spot. And if things progress during training camp and during the offseason programs, and it looks like they've got something, then there is that spot available. Yeah, Becton can slide right in there. It certainly could be the curveball that they weren't able to get in the draft, like you're saying earlier, that second round pick. They went out and they got a project guy who is still young, has a lot of raw tools. And I think Jeff Stoutland sees a guy like that and says, I can work with that. Let's see what we can do. So, is he too tall? Are his arms too long? He's probably more naturally suited to tackle, but I feel like tackles transition to guard a lot easier than guards transition to tackles. And so, I think it's possible. I think it's certainly the potential's there. Do I think it's likely? No, only because he hasn't shown it to this point, but I think he's going to get better coaching here in Philadelphia, certainly, than he did with the Jets.
That would be a big offensive line if Mekhi Becton's playing guard for the Eagles. But John, I want to thank you for joining the show, man. And make sure you follow John on Twitter at John Stolness. He does great work, great follow, has great opinions on all Philadelphia sports. John, thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate it.
Anytime, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
All right, Johnny Mac, pretty good stuff there from Johnny Stolness. If you guys like John Stolness, make sure you like the show, as it's the best thing you can do to help the show reach more people, to help the show grow. Pretty good insight there. Me and John will come back. We have a short segment, and then we're going to have Bill Colarulo in a little earlier than our normal guest spot. He'll be in at 9:10. So we'll get Bill's opinion on the draft. We'll get Bill's opinion on some of the things we just talked about with John Stolness, and all that coming up next on Birds 365.
Field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Hi, I'm Jim Muehlbronner, Managing Partner at Del Val Insurance Group. Give us a call. We're a local, knowledgeable agency, not an 800 number. Go Birds!
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365. We just had John Stolness on from Bleeding Green Nation. John, he's still Bleeding Green Nation, right? I know they got rid of the top. Yeah, he's still doing work over at Bleeding Green Nation. And then coming up next, Bill Colarulo, or as many in the chat like to call him, Big Bill. So we'll talk to Big Bill a little bit later on. Almost 500 of everybody streamed in right now, almost 350 on YouTube. We need to get more likes up, everybody. Let's get to at least 100 likes during the live show. And then I'm sure more will come in after, but make sure you like the show to help us grow. John, a lot of people are talking about this week on social media, the Carson Wentz trade has officially concluded. Now, it's one of those really confusing trades where Howie got a bunch back and then he moved it for more and traded up and used all the assets in different ways. But Jeff Kerr, our buddy Jeff Kerr, did a great breakdown of every move. I'll just read the final result. Eagles receive Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Kyron Johnson, Jalen Carter, Cooper DeJean, Jalix Hunt, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., 2025 4th-round pick, 2025 5th-round pick. The Colts received Carson Wentz, Matt Pryor, Alec Pierce, Jelani Woods, Bernard Raymond, and Andrew Ogletree. And then the Saints received Chris Olave, Trevor Penning, and Jordan Jackson. But wow, with hindsight, that trade looks tremendous to get that type of value out of a quarterback that really turned into nothing after that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I mean, I love Jeff, by the way. Don't get me wrong, but I do think people do stuff like that, and he's not the only one that's pointed out.
Yeah, he wrote this because of all the social media talk about it,
and that's an example of stacking good decisions, right? So the end game, because he's not taking stuff he got from the card, he's also spinning that off into
trading up for players
and stacking continuously stacking good decisions. So you can't really boil it down to this is what the Eagles got for Carson Wentz. And if you do that, it looks really good. You know, probably the best trade in NFL history was the Herschel Walker trade by the Dallas Cowboys. And everybody talks about that to this day. And it's the same thing with that. No, Jimmy Johnson got a bunch of picks, way too many. Obviously, Minnesota at the time, way overpaid. And all that kind of stuff. But then he spun off what he got into so much more. And they say, well, you know, they boil it all down to that's what they got for Herschel Walker. And that's not the case. Similar here to Carson Wentz. But what you can say is how he did a really good job in that situation of rebounding. He also put himself in that situation also,
Yeah,
as
it's
people
true.
will point out. But he did a heck of a job rebounding. And that's what I always talk about the Eagles. The more good decisions you stack, the better outcomes you're going to have long term. And that's what happened with the Carson Wentz trade. But that there's so many layers to it and so many levels and so many spinning off of draft picks and things like that. You can't really boil it down to the specific end game and saying this is a player they got for Carson Wentz. You can do it. People do it more often than not. And it's easier to do it that way, but it's not really real. It's
it's not a 1-for-1 type of deal.
No.
That's why I love to talk about what Howie did in this draft. It goes under the radar. Everybody's focused on the players. They got 3 picks for next year, and we've said it many times this week. Watch what Howie does now with those 3 picks. He's not just going to take picks at those, take players at those picks. He's probably going to package them and get more picks or move up, or now they're not as premium assets, but still, when Howie makes a move like that, there's a lot more that comes from that. So it's good to point that out and notice it.
Yeah, it is. And he's done a tremendous job. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I say it all the time to the point I get sick of saying it. But those boiling it down to, the end game, it's not just this, again, Eagles make good decisions. Colts probably made some bad decisions in there. Maybe if they made good decisions, it would look better. Blah, blah, blah.
Well, the evaluation of the player matters. If Carson Wentz panned out, it would have been a fine decision for the Colts.
If Carson Wentz panned out, he wouldn't have left.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but everybody was hoping that he could return to form, which he ended up never doing. But Big Bill is in the waiting room. I see Bill Colarulo waiting for us in the waiting room. So everybody's been looking forward to his return to JAKIB Sports. We'll talk to Big Bill coming up next, another short time out, and then Bill Colarulo from 97.5 The Fanatic coming up next on Birds 365.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365. Joined now by great friend of the program, great friend of the network, Bill Colarulo. Bill, nice to see you again, man. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be back on JAKIB, man. Love the Birds 365 show. I've been checking it out. What's going on, Johnny?
What's up, Bill? Good to see you, bud. Happy for your success over at 97.5. Doing a tremendous job over there with my buddy Andrew DeCecco. I see you guys have been talking about the draft. So let's get your thoughts. What's your excitement level over that process? How are we getting a lot of flowers? Bill Colarulo in that group? Did you put in your money to give Howie his flowers?
Look, he deserves his flowers, but you know better than anybody, John. The draft, it's hard to grade right away. We got to see how it goes. But right now, only a few days removed from the draft, it's hard not to be happy with what happened. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean with your first two picks, nobody saw that coming. And I like some of the moves they made later, but, we'll kind of see how it plays out. I'm usually very positive, but with the draft, I always preach patience because you just don't know. I mean, everybody thinks their draft was good, usually.
Yes. No, everybody. You're right. Everybody thinks they hit a home run. Everybody.
Yeah.
And that's not the case.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Bill, we'll see how all these players pan out, but I do want to give you a chance to comment on at least the decision-making. I mean, this is what John and I have been talking about all week. Howie is sound in making decisions during the draft. I mean, I keep pointing to the Cooper DeJean trade. Go wait. You go up to 40, and then there's a small run on cornerbacks. It really seems like Howie has mastered reading the draft board and kind of playing other teams almost. What'd you make of Howie's decision-making in during the NFL draft?
It's always good, man. And I think you look at also his ability to pick up the third, the fourth, and the fifth rounders for next year is I think Howie has a luxury that a lot of general managers don't, which is job security. He knows he doesn't have to worry about always winning right now. He can prepare and plan for the future, which a lot of these GMs, they don't care about stockpiling picks for next year or the year after because they may not be the GM next year or the year after. So I think it's helpful that he has that job security. But the fact that he was able to play the board the way he did, Quinyon Mitchell falls right into his lap. And then I did love the aggressiveness going up and getting a Cooper DeJean in the second round. The Jalix Hunt pick, I'm sure Jalix Hunt has all of the skills and attributes to be a double-digit sack guy if they grow him and develop him the right way. Me personally, though, I would have rather have seen them go a different direction right there in the third round. I think this team had some other needs that maybe could have been addressed. But at the same time, I always preach, hey, take the best player available. So if they thought Jalix Hunt was the best player available in the third round, then I guess you take him. It's just for me, I would have rather have seen them got maybe a better linebacker, maybe a better second tight end than a developmental edge rusher that maybe we don't see contribute for a couple years.
Yeah, and Peyton Wilson won a couple spots after Jalix Hunt. That's one decision I've been looking at. And Peyton Wilson, great linebacker, maybe the best linebacker in this draft, but he was in the third round for a reason. He had a lot of injury issues. He had some off the field issues earlier in his college career. So he didn't, there were a lot of teams that put him down on the board, but I did notice that Pittsburgh took him, and Pittsburgh has a very good reputation, very good medical staff that a lot of people lean on throughout the league at University of Pittsburgh. And my thought process there is if Pittsburgh cleared him, it's probably okay from a physical standpoint. And then I say the one obvious weakness on this team, Bill, is off-ball linebacker. Maybe Nakobe Dean turns into what we all hoped he would be, but the evidence hasn't been there. Devin White, people in Tampa couldn't wait to get rid of him. That's what you're looking at off-ball linebacker. and you could have had a potential day one starter versus a guy who might not help you for 3 years. That to me is a little bit shaky.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on the linebacker position because I think you look at that defense, and look, I know we're being greedy, but that's what we have to be right now in the offseason. But you look at the defense, and the linebacker, once again, is a question mark going into this season. We're all hopeful Nakobe Dean turns out to be the guy he was at Georgia. We just haven't seen it. Devin White, up and down when he was in Tampa. So he's another question mark. And then behind those two guys, what do you have? A bunch of question marks. We don't know if Oren Burks is going to be able to step in and play at a high level. He was mainly a special teamer in San Francisco. Ben Van Sumeren played fullback a couple of years ago. Zach Bond, I think, is more of an edge rusher on this defense with Vic Fangio. And I know people are excited about Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but 5th round rookie. So you have a bunch of question marks. I would have loved to have seen them take a flyer on Peyton Wilson. I mean, I know he has literally no ACL in his knee, is from what I'm reading, but he would have been a guy that could have been, at that point, taking him in the 2nd round would have been probably too high for an injury-prone linebacker like that. But at the 3rd round, instead of a developmental piece, to take a flyer on a guy at a position where you really need it, we'll see. Linebacker came back to haunt them last year. Hopefully it doesn't happen this season.
Bill, what do you think of the defensive backs position? Obviously, they added those 2 picks, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. How do you think they fit? Do you think they can be year one contributors to this football team? I think coming into the offseason, all Eagles fans were looking for an improved defense. They were looking for more players on defense. Well, they addressed the position in a big way. They addressed the side of the football in a big way in the draft. Do you think they have a big impact on the football team this year? And what do you make of those picks?
So it's going to be interesting because I'm really curious how Vic Fangio utilizes all this versatility he now has on the back end. We know how versatile Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is. He has the ability to come down and play that nickel corner. We saw him do it when he was here 2 years ago. We saw him do it when he was in New Orleans before he transitioned to safety. And now you add Cooper DeJean, who also has the ability to probably play all of these positions on the back end. So how does he deploy these guys? I'm excited to see. But with Quinyon Mitchell, obviously they want him to be a true outside corner. I hope he wins the starting job in training camp, but I'm not ruling out Kelee Ringo yet. I loved what I saw from Kelee Ringo last year. I think another year with him, learning everything you read and you hear about Vic Fangio is this guy's a great teacher. I'm excited to see what Kelee Ringo does in year 2. Still only 21 years old, John. I mean, this is a young guy.
Yeah,
so
really
I expect a battle in training camp between Kelee Ringo and Quinyon Mitchell for that other outside cornerback position. I hope Quinyon wins it. 1st round pick. I think his ceiling is really, really high. I'm just not ruling out Kelee just yet.
I'm with you. I talk about Kelee a lot. I love his upside. I think he really showed something late last season. One of the few Eagles to show anything late last season. He's tremendously athletic, very young, as you mentioned, Bill. James Bradbury, Adam Schefter was on with you guys in the morning today saying, he doesn't think the Eagles want to move up James Bradbury. I think he's a great fit for Vic Fangio as a natural zone corner, as a guy who's savvy, understands, communicates well. I don't necessarily believe that the Eagles look. There's a lot of bodies at cornerback all of a sudden when you add in Cooper DeJean as well with Quinyon Mitchell, because the Eagles scouted Cooper DeJean as an outside corner. Doesn't mean when the coaches get a hold of him, he can't change. He's very versatile, but nonetheless, he can play. Isaiah Rodgers. Yeah. I don't know how many phone calls you took at 97.5, but we never. This guy's Deion Sanders, evidently.
Everybody
loves
going
to slot right in. Now, Isaiah Rodgers, there's no path to playing time. They have too many bodies at corner. You don't believe James Bradbury is going to be back, do you?
I don't. I think it made sense not to cut him yet. There was no need to. You cut him pre-June 1st. The cap hit was ridiculous. So I thought it made sense to keep him around. I think it even makes sense to keep him through training camp. Let's see if maybe he shocks the world and comes back as the 2022 version. I'm not expecting it, but why not have him here in training camp, see what he has left? And if at that time he's not the same guy he was in 2022 and he's still the Bradbury he was last year, then I think you cut him. I just don't think there's any rush to do it.
Well, I also think your training camp thought if there's an injury somewhere else, maybe somebody gets desperate and
Yeah.
offers you something for James Bradbury. So, yeah, wait it out. I mean, play out the clock.
Yeah, it's just funny though, because you look at that cornerback room and all of a sudden it's turned into a pretty deep room. Now there's again some question marks. We don't know how obviously Quinyon and Cooper DeJean will play at the NFL level. We don't know what Isaiah Rodgers is going to look like after missing a year, being suspended. What does Zach McPherson look like this year, coming back after he tore his Achilles in training camp last season? So there's a lot of question marks, but the upside now with that cornerback room is high.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Vic Fangio does. And look, I'm not the biggest James Bradbury guy, but I do think there's value. John's pointed out how well he fits Vic Fangio's defense. And the other part of it is Vic Fangio's defense is a communication-heavy defense. There's a lot of different things that these young guys are going to have to learn on the fly. So from that perspective, I think keeping Bradbury on the roster would actually make more sense than letting him go for nothing, unless someone comes in with a great trade offer. I wouldn't be jumping to move Bradbury. But, Bill, I want to ask you about day 3. Any picks stand out to you on day 3? Obviously, Trotter Jr., we briefly talked about, but I thought the Birds did a pretty good job of getting value in day 3. I thought they got some players that could potentially contribute to this team in the future. What'd you think of the day 3 that they had?
I liked it. I'm trying to temper my expectations because you're talking about some 5th-round rookies.
Yeah, right.
But I really like the Trevor Keegan pick. This is a
that's
guy,
my favorite too.
I mean, he started, 37 games at guard on the Michigan Wolverines, who won back-to-back Joe Moore Awards for the best offensive line in college football, and he's the starting right guard. So I like that. But I'll tell you, my favorite move was the Anais Smith move out of Texas A&M. I know he's a 5th-round wide receiver. They don't always pan out, but you look at his film and you look at what he did at Texas A&M in the SEC, and then you look at the Eagles roster where they really don't have a clear-cut wide receiver 3. I know they brought in Paris Campbell. They brought in Devontae Parker, who don't really move the needle for me. I think Anais Smith has a real shot if he can come in here and be that all-purpose guy who gets the yards after catch. To me, he is a true slot receiver that could fit with this offense. You're not going to have any shot at breaking the lineup as an outside wide receiver with Devontae and AJ. But Anais Smith in the slot, that's intriguing to me.
Yeah, I'd like the Anais Smith pick as well, Bill. But my concern is he comes across to me as a manufactured touch player. And I've seen no evidence of this team being able to take advantage of that type of player. That's a Kyle Shanahan type of player. That's where you have to.
You have Kellen Moore now, though, John.
Yeah, well, Kellen doesn't have a great history of it either. If you look at it, not a lot of people do. People talk about it, and you might see it scripted early in those first 15 plays, and then you got to show a lot of discipline because the easiest way to get somebody the football is run a route.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do all this jet sweep, orbit motion. Maybe I'll script it up, but then they get away from it. They're not disciplined enough to go back to it. So I don't trust the Eagles with that type of player. Now, while I say that, I mentioned that to somebody down there, and I kind of got balked at. No, he can run routes. Kenny. I mean, I saw that film. He looks like a manufactured touch guy to me. So I don't know. But I'm with you. I don't care about Paris Campbell. I don't care about Devontae Parker. They got to get better from those guys.
Yeah, my concern is, as you know, Nick Sirianni usually leans veteran. We know he's got some history with Paris Campbell. So if I'm looking at the roster right now, I'm thinking Paris Campbell has the inside track at the wide receiver 3. But Howie Roseman made it a point at the Combine to specifically talk about, hey, we need to play some of our younger guys. Sometimes you're going to look at the depth chart and you're not going to feel comfortable because maybe the guy hasn't done it yet, but we took this guy or we brought this guy in because we believe in him. So I'm hoping that maybe Sirianni's mentality switches a little bit and they'll give some of these young guys opportunities over the Paris Campbells or the Devontae Parkers.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about Trevor Keegan too. I thought that was a great pick. I mean, 37 starts. He was a captain at Michigan. I think he was all big, whatever the team is to make for the Big Ten. He was a starter on that team. So I think he's a great pick. And anytime you give Stoutland, a player like that. I think he can do something with him, but I want to get your opinion on Mekhi Becton. 24 John's talked about it. How many offensive linemen went in this draft? If you said before the draft, will Howie not get one of them? You'd say you're crazy. So they go and they get Mekhi Becton, young, just turned 25, got tons of starts in the league. What do you think of that? And can he be a potential swing tackle for this team?
I think they had to go get him because all of us assumed. I thought they were going to take an offensive lineman that could play tackle in the first round. It's just like you just mentioned, the way the first round went, they couldn't get him. Very clear, and Howie admitted as much, that they did want to try to get a tackle in the draft, but they couldn't get one because as much as I love Trevor Keegan pick and Dylan McMahon, neither one of those guys is going to have the ability to slide outside and be that swing tackle you talked about. So I think the Mekhi Becton move was really out of necessity. They had to get some more depth at tackle, losing Driscoll. So I like it, but I'm also, again, not getting overly excited. This guy did miss 33 out of 34 games in 2021 and 2022. But to me, this just screams Jeff Stoutland. I mean, if there's a guy that can come in here with all the talent that Mekhi Becton has and Stoutland can get a hold of him, I think he can, if he could stay healthy. There's a reason why he was the 11th overall pick in 2020. So it's exciting. It's certainly exciting because they needed it, but hopefully we never see him because that would mean Mailata or Lane Johnson's not playing. So hopefully we don't see Mekhi Becton, but I think it was a necessary move.
Well, I'm gonna tell you how we see Mekhi Becton. Starting right guard, 6'7" and 3/8" 364-pound Mekhi Becton. Is that a possibility or not, Bill? Will they consider?
Interesting.
It's evident that they don't believe in Tyler Steen. They're not going to hand him that job. And that's why they were looking for what they were looking for in the first round, which was a Troy Potano or a J.C. Latham, a guy who could start at guard and kick out to ultimately right tackle whenever Lane Johnson decides to retire. That would have been the perfect world for the Eagles. They weren't able to get that player. Did they get that player after the draft? Well, they look at Mekhi Becton as a guard.
I'm not sure, but you mentioned Troy Fatano. That was the guy I wanted in the first round. That's exactly who I thought, for the reasons you just said. He could compete for right guard, and then he could slide out to tackle. But I'm not sure that I'm with you on that they don't believe in Tyler Steen necessarily, because they did wait until the 5th round to draft an interior offensive lineman. I think if they felt that Tyler Steen was not as close as you're indicating, maybe they would have used the 3rd round pick instead of Jalix Hunt on an interior lineman. Maybe they would have used the 4th round pick instead of Will Shipley on an interior offensive lineman. They waited all the way to the 5th round. So I think Tyler Steen does have the inside track, and I know we shouldn't look too much into this, but the way they set up the lockers, they did move Tyler Steen's locker there.
Right. I mean, look, he's penciled in. He's got the inside track. That's what that indicates, Bill. You're right. He's got the inside track, but it's evident the Eagles don't want to hand him the job. It might be Matt Hennessy. It might be Mekhi Becton. It might be Trevor Keegan. They want competition, and I think you're right. The player, I think the Eagles wanted more than they have this cloud of prospects. They have 4 or 5 guys, basically. Wherever they start, they identify a cloud of prospects. And I think if you gave Howie truth serum, number 1 this year would have been Fautano. Mitchell probably number 2. Not a bad pick. Devontae Smith was once number 5 at 5. That worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
So it's not about that, but they wanted competition. They don't want to hand them that job. Where's that competition coming from? So give me percentages. Hennessy, Keegan, Becton.
I think it's probably equal between all 3. I think I don't know. They really know what they have. Hennessy's another guy who's battled injuries. Mekhi Becton battled injuries, and Keegan's a 5th-round rookie. So I think all 3 of those guys are going to compete equally. But look, just like we thought last year, John, that there was going to be a competition at right guard. There was never a competition at right
No.
guard. They gave that job to Cam Jurgens. They never said it officially going into training camp. All of us thought there's going to be a competition. There never was one. So is that kind of what we're going to see with Tyler Steen this year? They're not saying it's his job, but they didn't say it was Cam's job either.
Well, Nick didn't. But I'll say the difference is we all knew it was Cam's job. And that Nick would, by the way, was hilarious at one point because the only reason Nick kept getting that question was because he wouldn't admit it. And then one day, nobody else took a first team rep. Nobody. And then one day, somebody asked the question, is Cam Jurgens a starter? And he said, nobody else has taken a first team rep. What do you think? We all knew Cam Jurgens was the starter. We all knew there was no competition. In this case, Bill, we don't know that. And I think it's a big difference. They've clearly sort of indicated that they want competition, but they weren't able to get it via the draft. And that's why I say that sense of urgency of getting Becton so soon after the draft, I think that was plan B. And they acted quickly when it was like in place. They were like, well, if we get Baltano, we're not signing him. But if we don't, bang, there it is.
Now, Becton, and you maybe know this better, but I don't think he's ever played guard, though.
No.
Right? He's never played.
He's big. We don't have Justin Herbert back there. Jalen Hurts is 6'1".
But you know what? And to be fair, Landon Dickerson is 6'6".
Yeah, that's true.
Trevor Keegan is 6'6". It's the nature of the NFL. That's where it's going. You better find that passing angle.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm glad you brought it up. I want to look into him more now because I didn't have Mekhi Becton necessarily competing for that right guard position. I thought it would.
And I don't know if he's going to. He might be too big.
Yeah, our buddy Jeff Rozier put it out there that they might consider him for right guard from inside the Birds.
It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely an interesting thought. But you're right. They definitely wanted offensive line earlier in the draft. And as soon as they couldn't get it, they went to Mekhi Becton, which, again, I think is a smart move by Howie. They needed depth along that line, losing Opeta, losing Driscoll, obviously losing Jason Kelsey. You needed something because before they signed Mekhi Becton, I guess the swing tackle was who? Fred Johnson?
Yeah. And last 2 years, the Eagles did it a little bit differently. They sort of had a left backup, which was Andre Dillard, then Fred Johnson, and they had a right backup, which was Jack Driscoll. Most teams and the Eagles want to go back to the swing tackle approach. But if it works out both ways, Mekhi Becton could be your starting right guard and your swing tackle and kick out if, God forbid, something happens to Lane Johnson or Jordan Mailata. And there's no doubt if that were the case that Mekhi Becton would move back out to tackle. But with Tyler Steen, if you go back to the first year Jordan started full time, it was Andre Dillard got the first rep on Monday. Jordan Mailata got the first rep on Tuesday. Then it was back to Dillard. Then it was back to it was a legitimate competition. With Cam, no. He took every single first team rep. So it is a little bit different. I think Tyler Steen is more in the category of Andre Dillard, Jordan Mailata. I think they want to see some other people, and it might be Hennessy, and it might be Tyler Steen. He might go win the job, and the locker theory will hold up.
Yeah. Maybe we'll find out they're doing that mandatory mini camp this year coming up in June, so maybe we'll find some more out then.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing. I want to thank everybody for checking in. Big Bill, who's a fan favorite in the chat. Big Bills. So if you like Big Bills, make sure you drop us a like on the show so more people can see the segment with Big Bill. Bill, one more draft pick I want to talk to you about, and it's not so much the pick as it is the philosophy, and it's Will Shipley. The team loves these running backs that can catch out of the backfield, that can kind of do it all. I don't understand it. Less the philosophy. Your quarterback doesn't like to do it. He mans the offense. He's your star player. He doesn't like to throw out of the backfield. You have a humongous offensive line. Get me a LeGarrette Blount. Get me a Jordan Howard-esque running back. The Eagles just don't want to do it. What'd you think of the Will Shipley pick and what they're doing at that position?
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. Look, you got Saquon Barkley now, and they didn't give him the money they gave him to take him off the field very often. So you look at last year's team, even with DeAndre Swift, your third running back didn't get a lot of playing time at all. So I don't see Will Shipley beating out Kenny Gainwell. I think everything we hear is that they like Kenny Gainwell. So I'm not sure how much you even see Will Shipley this year. But again, John talked about Anais Smith being a guy that they have to manufacture touches. That's what I kind of thought Will Shipley was going to be this year, that maybe they could move him around if they wanted to get him some touches, because he has the ability, like you said, to catch the ball out of the backfield. Maybe they used him in the slot every once in a while. But it is interesting that they keep getting these smaller running backs that have these dual threat and don't utilize them. But maybe things will be different with a Kellen Moore. That's what I keep thinking, is maybe we'll figure out with this offense and Kellen Moore in Jalen Hurts' ear that it's okay to take the small little dump pass to your running back, because I also expect him to use Saquon Barkley in that fashion. We know he can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So you have these running backs. It would be criminal for Jalen not to utilize them this year. DeAndre Swift last year was underutilized out of the backfield when it came
35 catches last year.
Yeah, to the passing.
I'll believe it when I see it, when they
So-
start throwing to the running back. You know, one of the other things is kickoff returner, because it's going to be more relevant this year.
Absolutely.
Boston Scott is gone. Will Shipley can return kicks. That might be his spot to get some playing time early. Aeneas Smith, more of a punt returner. Isaiah Rodgers was a hell of a kickoff returner.
They have so many options, John.
Yeah.
I mean, they have so many options now. You have Cooper DeJean, who returned punts at Iowa. You still have Britton Covey, obviously. Isaiah Rodgers.
Eagles love Covey as a punt returner. That's why Cooper can return punts. Quinyon Mitchell can return kicks, but you know he's going to be busy with other things. Yeah, they have a lot of options. You're right.
Yeah, it
They got
certainly
a lot of
did look like
athletes.
that rule change played into a lot of teams, you know, putting more stock in that position, or at least having a competent player. It makes sense if it's going to be a lot bigger part of the game.
Yeah, you look at what Howie did so far in this draft, and it's all athletic players. I mean, these guys are crazy athletic. When you look at Cooper DeJean and Will Shipley and Aeneas Smith, the fact that they all had that return ability shows how athletic they were. And I'm excited to see the kickoff this year with all these different pieces and how it's going to be. But yeah, like we always talk about, the old cliche is football's a three-phase game: offense, defense, and special teams. Unfortunately, we learned that the hard way in Super Bowl 57 when special teams came back to haunt us. But it's going to be even more important this year when the return on kickoffs is actually back. There will be more returns.
Yeah.
And don't forget, the Eagles drafted Jason Kelsey, number 191 overall in 2011. Now they drafted an athletic center, number 190 overall in the 6th round. So by that transitive theory, Bill Colarulo, Dylan McMahon is the next Jason Kelsey. Are you counting on that?
That's a tough comparison to make. I mean, I felt bad because I compared Will Shipley. I said he's the poor man's Christian McCaffrey, and I said that's not even fair.
He's the broke man's Christian McCaffrey.
He's the poor man's Kenny Gainwell. Come on, don't get ahead of yourself.
I'll even go by Will is the nicest kid in the world. I told Zander, I raved about him. I've never seen anybody have a better opening press conference than Will Shipley. He is a smart kid. Everything you're going to love him.
Well, Howie
Will Shipley. But
Howie
he's
told
a
us,
homeless man's Christian
homeless man.
McCaffrey.
Well, Howie told us last year about that Red Star and that Sidney Brown was a Red Star guy. And then this year he said they got five of those guys.
I tried to find out who they were. They will not admit it because they don't want to. I get why. They don't want to downplay the guys who weren't.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, Will Shipley, 1,000% is one of those 5 red stars. 1,000%.
And I love that they did that because they did. Look, you lost Fletcher Cox, you lost Jason Kelsey. They're very big on culture, which I think is extremely important. And now you brought in a bunch of rookies who you gave the 5-star or the red star to, 5 of these guys. And they've told us what that means. These guys were captains and all that. So I like that they've added that type of player to their culture. But Dylan McMahon, to me, he's another one of these Jeff Stoutland University guys. I was looking at his shuttle, the 4.33, being the second
awesome
fastest.
athlete.
Yeah, being second fastest amongst interior offensive linemen. But John, outside of Dylan McMahon, if God forbid Juergens was to get hurt, who's your first backup center? Is it Hennessy? You're not going to want to move Dickerson away from left guard.
No, you're not moving him. No way.
So I think McMahon, even as a 6th rounder, still has a good shot to make the team because you need some depth at center because you really don't have it outside of Hennessy.
Yeah, Matt was a starting center at Atlanta, and he was pretty good. So, I mean, but all the questions about Matt Hennessy are injury related.
Yeah.
Because he was an ascending player until the injuries took over. But he's a big question mark, but he can play if he's healthy. Yeah, I'm with you with I was joking about Dylan McMahon, by the way. No,
yeah. but you're never one to get too
joking, John. You don't really think he's going to be Jason Kelsey?
But by definition, he's one of the red, as you mentioned, team captain. He was the team captain, Trevor Keegan as well. So that's 3 of your 5 your red star players. My other guesses would be Cooper and Jalix Hunt. Jalix is, he went to Cornell.
You don't think Quinyon?
No, but it doesn't have to do with talent. It's got to do, as you mentioned, team captain. Not that he doesn't have great character because they love his character. That's the thing, because he could have went to Alabama and he stuck at Toledo.
Yeah, right.
Nick Saban was trying to get him in the transfer portal, and he said, no, these guys were loyal to me. So if I had to pick the 5, if he was one of the 5, it wouldn't surprise me.
That's what I loved the most when Saban said that they were trying to get him in the transfer portal, because a lot of Eagles fans are nervous that the Eagles took Quinyon Mitchell when Kool-Aid McKinstry was on the board, Terry and Arnold was on the board.
Yeah.
These are 2 guys that were already at Alabama, and Saban's trying to get Quinyon Mitchell to transfer to Alabama. So that made me feel a little better.
Yeah, and you mentioned the loyalty to Toledo. I think John mentioned that. You kind of have it in 2 receivers here who I know they just got paid big money, but those guys know as well as us, those deals are going to be bargains once the market.
They could have got more.
So they're showing some loyalty too to staying to Philadelphia. Now you get a guy who's a loyal type of guy at cornerback. Pretty good stuff. Bill, before we let you go, I know you're coming up at 10 a.m. on 97.5 The Fanatic, doing great work over there. Make sure everybody follows Bill on Twitter at Bill Colarulo and all his social platforms. Does a great job on Instagram and YouTube as well. What did you think overall of the NFL draft? I mean, any other teams stand out to you, either good or bad?
The New York Giants surprised me. Now we're hearing that they did try to move up. I guess they wanted Drake May.
Oh, they wanted Drake.
Yeah. So at first they really surprised me because I'm thinking, how could you not take a quarterback and you took a wide receiver? Because I just don't think the Giants are going to be that high on the draft board, because I don't think Daniel Jones is very good, but I think he's good enough that you're going to be in that purgatory where there'll be 7-10, 8-9. The only reason they were as high as they were this past year was because he got hurt.
Right.
So I don't know if they're going to have that ability to take a quarterback that high in the draft. But once I read that they did try to get Drake May, I guess they just weren't sold on the J.J. McCarthy or the Michael Penix Jr. And then that's the other surprise for me is Atlanta. I just don't understand why you take a quarterback there after you just gave Kirk Cousins $100 million guaranteed.
Yeah, bizarre decision by Atlanta. That's why we talk about decisions. Howie Roseman, generally everything makes sense. Some of these other teams, you go, what are you doing? What is the plan here? Yeah. And, evaluation, sometimes you get the player right. Sometimes you get them wrong. We get it right with Bill Colarulo. Go do 10 o'clock, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It was fun to be back on JAKIB. I see some of the Power Hour crew checking in the chat.
They're looking for you, Bill. They're all accusing me of firing you. I'm like, believe me, I didn't let Big Bills go. He left me.
No, we're hoping to still do some work together. So it was just the scheduling made it difficult. So any chance I get to come back on JAKIB, I'll be here, man.
We appreciate you, Bill. Bill, real quick, do the Sixers force a Game 7?
I hope so. That's what we're going to spend a lot of time on the radio today talking about.
I'm going to give you an over-under. Joel Embiid turnover 6-3 in the final 3 minutes.
I think he's going under. I think he's going under tonight. I'm expecting a big bounce back from Joel, but Tyrese Maxey, we knew he was a star, but we learned the other night that he is a superstar. That was unbelievable.
You need a closer. You need a creator to close games. The Sixers have to explain that to Joel Embiid. Get him to the final 5 minutes, but the final 5 minutes, that's Tyrese.
Yeah,
offense has to run through Tyrese Maxey.
46 in an elimination game. That's a bona fide superstar, Bill, as you said. Bill, thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, boys. I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, Bill.
Good stuff from Bill Colarulo, all the chat. I know you guys love Big Bill. I'm a big fan of Big Bill as well. So you heard him. Hopefully we can do more with him and JAKIB Sports. He does a great job over at 97.5 The Fanatic. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. A lot of people watching the show right now. Make sure you drop a like for Big Bill, drop a like for Johnny Mac and I. We appreciate it. Coming back, we'll put a close on the show. First week after the draft. It went by quick. It already feels like it's settled dust to me, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, well, when you cover a team, always look forward, never look back.
Yep.
Now it's rookie camp.
Rookie camp coming up tomorrow. So we'll see what we learn about these guys that we've spent all week talking about. So stay tuned here on Birds 365. We'll come back and put a close on the show. Stay tuned.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Listen, if we even think you owe us money, you won't know what hit you. We'll put liens on everything you own. Raid your bank accounts, retirement fund, pension. You'll open up your paycheck and cry because we'll already have the money. We'll haul you into federal court and you might even go to jail. Hey, it's our job.
Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. Our experts will fight for you using IRS guidelines to stop any IRS actions like bank levies or wage garnishments. Plus, eliminate penalties and interest and reduce your past tax bill so you pay the IRS less. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a tax doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
I'd have my mom call the number on the screen. You come see me alone. We'll work it out. Really, we will.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Thursday's edition of Birds 365, putting a wrap on the show. John, rookie camp starting up tomorrow. What are you looking for? What are you looking to see from rookie camp? What are your expectations? Maybe they're not much, but what are they leading into rookie camp?
Yeah, John Ross is showing up.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. I always like to see the tryout players that come in. But you're just looking for first impressions of guys like Quinyon Mitchell on the field, Cooper DeJean, guys you expect to play. And really, if I'm being honest, those are the two guys that I expect to have somewhat significant roles. And then the others, as I said, Will Shipley is a kickoff returner. I think that might be his potential to get on the field a little bit. Anaya Smith is a little bit interesting. The Eagles have already admitted Jalix Hunt is developmental prospect. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., we've talked about a lot. Most of these guys will start at the end of the depth chart. Trevor Keegan, I think maybe, and we're not going to know that until later in OTAs or minicamp. But that might be the most interesting story about the Eagles is where's that competition going to come from at right guard? Is it going to be Hennessy? That's the most likely from my perspective. Is it going to be Becton? Is it going to be Keegan? Is it going to be Tyler Steen getting the Cam Jurgens treatment with Nick Sirianni not admitting it, but giving him every first team rep? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think somebody else is going to get an opportunity to push him. And if I were betting early, it's going to be Matt Hennessy, but there are some other options as well.
Yeah, we just kicked that around a lot with Bill. John, on Monday when we talked about Becton, I was with you. I didn't see him as a right guard. Too big, not the right fit.
No, he's too big.
Thought process on that evolved at all? Do you think that's possible?
I don't. But I mean, guys are getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, Landon's big. You're starting to get in 6'8" territory, and there's a big difference between 6'6" and 6'8". When you're talking about throwing lanes and things like that, but he's never played the position before. He's a natural tackle, and Bill's right. John Stolness is right when he said it's easier to move from tackle to guard than vice versa. But they're different positions. You're basically out on an island at tackle. You're more in the phone booth at guard. I think he's got the power to do it. Does he have the leverage? A lot of these great defensive tackles, they're going to get underneath him pretty easily if he tries to play just because of his length. I don't think it's going to happen, but I do think it was an interesting point brought up by Jeff Mosher. Why not Mekhi Becton? The point is the Eagles don't have an answer at right guard right now. And I think, as I said, Paultano was, to me, the guy, and they didn't get him. And all of a sudden, people are assuming Tyler Steen's the guy. No, they wouldn't have been looking at players that they were looking at if they had that conviction that Tyler Steen could be the right guard. Remember, he was a tackle his entire college career at Vanderbilt and Alabama, all tackle. And the Eagles just projected him to right guard because he's got shorter arms than somebody like Mekhi Becton. But he got one start against Dallas, and it wasn't good. So we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing. John, what's the protocol for Jalen? And let's just say, for a hypothetical, let's just say they do put Becton in at guard. Is it a 7-step drop? You just got to drop back further to be able to see over these dudes, or?
No, I mean, you see what the NFL is becoming. It's becoming more like college anyway. You have these quick drops, these quick throws. In the case, the Eagles are probably more, at least they have been before Kellen Moore. They're a team that likes to push the football down the field more than most. And then that kind of situation, you are doing those longer drops anyway when you're trying to get the football down the field. So it doesn't affect that. What it affects is the mid-range game, which the Eagles have to get better at. And we'll see how it shakes out. But yeah, I mean, for the running game, maybe it makes sense. But again, they don't like one-cut running backs anyway. So I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out. I would not bet on Mekhi Becton at right guard, but I
don't see it either. But
yeah.
So we'll see. We'll start up rookie camp tomorrow, as we talked about. Johnny Mac will be back. Johnny Mac and I will be back tomorrow morning for Friday's edition of Birds 365. We already got 2 guests locked in. We got Paul Domowich in the morning, as he always joins us on Fridays, and then we'll have Mark Farzetta in hour number 2. We'll get their reaction on draft week and all the things we've kicked around today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in the chat, Daz and James and Crawley, Oatmeal, all you guys. We appreciate you guys checking in. Make sure you like the show so it helps us grow. We appreciate it. Johnny Mac, thanks for your work today. We'll be back tomorrow to put a recap on draft week. It's come and gone, and as you said, got to keep looking forward.
Rookie camp starts tomorrow, so got to do the show and head right down to NovaCare.
So Johnny Mac will be going to NovaCare. The fans are requesting some footage, John. So anything you can get. I know they're weird about that. They don't let you do much, but anything Johnny Mac does get down at camp, we will.
Competitive advantage.
Yeah, got to keep the competitive advantage. So anything John does get, though, we will post up on YouTube for all you guys to see. So Johnny Mac, thanks for your work today. Thanks everybody for checking in. We'll see you guys tomorrow on Friday's edition of Birds 365. Thanks everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate, inside the locker room, and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.